Hi everyone, welcome to this month's Power BI Dev Camp. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever your time zone is. My name is Kelly Kay. I'm with the Microsoft Power BI team, and I have the pleasure of introducing Phil Seamark and Ted Patterson today for Dev Camp. And without further ado, Ted, take it away.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Power BI Dev Camp. This is our fourth session, and the first time we have a guest speaker, which is Phil Seamark, so I get to listen and learn something as we go through the week. Maybe, Phil, if you advance to the next slide, just things that we have coming up in Power BI Dev Camp. Last month, we did a JavaScript session talking about working with the Power BI JavaScript API, and everything we did was in TypeScript. And now what we're going to do is move from jQuery and start using React. So we're going to have a whole session based on developing with React and kind of creating a front end for Power BI embedding. And then in January, we have a deep dive into custom visual development for Power BI. So exciting stuff. Phil, do you want to go and show that page of the repository in GitHub? So one of the things that we did was to basically create some hands-on labs. We're not going to have you do them here. But after this session, if you want to go through and do, pretty much exactly what Phil's going to be doing in his demos, we basically have a set of demos and a set of labs, and you'll install the .NET 5 SDK, you'll install basically Visual Studio Code, and, basically you don't need interaction. Hopefully the document should step you through and get you to success. So with that, I've told everyone about the different things, and now our main feature presentation. Phil, would you take it away?
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name's Phil Seamark, as Ted introduced. I work on the Power BI CAT team. And as part of my role on the CAT team, I work with very large enterprise customers and help unblock them. And my particular area of speciality on the CAT team tends to be around things like DAX and data modeling. So I end up working with large data models and trying to help them run faster, optimize them, and quite hands-on with the actual database engine itself, the one that sits underneath the covers under Power BI. Now, as you may or may not know, the database technology that Power BI sits on is called analysis services, which has been around for about 20 years in one shape or form of another. And for a while now, we have had a programming object library called TOM, Tabular Object Model, that allows clients in all sorts of tools such as Visual Studio, the full-blown edition, PowerShell, whatever. Today I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. So you can create scriptlets, code to connect to an analysis services model and perform a whole bunch of management activities. And what you can see here on the screen is an example hierarchy, that shows the object model, starting at the server. So what you typically would do is you would connect to a server instance, and then on that server there might be one or more databases. In fact, there might not be any databases. One of the cool things you can do with the tabular object model is completely create your own database instance from scratch. And if we have time at the end, I think Ted's going to talk to us a little bit about something he's been working on and can share, which is pretty cool. But in the Power BI world, typically you might connect to an instance of Power BI Desktop, which will already be a server, will have a database, and in that database will be a model with some data sources and tables and relationships, and tables have columns, and tables have measures, and all the sort of things you're used to working with from the UI side, but working directly via the object model. What Tom doesn't do in the Power BI world is have anything to do with the report canvas. So you can't do anything via Tom to create visuals or adjust what the look and feel of the report might look like. But certainly in the database itself, we can use Tom in a number of ways to do some pretty cool things. And today what I'm going to do is walk through some basic examples, or slowly more complicated examples, starting with the hello world. Every demo should really start with the hello world that's relevant for that language or environment, and we're gonna finish with some pretty cool things as well. So where can I use Tom? So anywhere that analysis services exist. So that's inside Power BI Desktop. Every time you open a PBIX file in Power BI Desktop, there is an instance of analysis services for you to connect to and work with. But you can only make some changes to that. We're rolling out the ability to do more and more there. If you publish your PBIX file to Power BI Premium and turn on XMLA read-write, then you can connect via Tom to do all sorts of things. Like, again, create an entire database from scratch and practically anything. And the other main world is analysis services, either Azure Analysis Services or the on-premises SQL Server Analysis Services version. But let's jump into it. Let's actually have a look to see what it looks like. And as I said just before, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to demonstrate this. You don't have to use Visual Studio Code. You could use a number of other technologies, but I like Visual Studio Code. It's pretty lightweight. It's pretty easy to get set up. Now, one thing I've done to get started early is install the .NET 5.0 SDK. So you don't have to watch me download and install that. And I also have pre-installed Visual Studio Code. They're the only two prerequisites that I have done. Everything else I'm going to demo and show you how to get set up. So we're practically running from scratch.
You're cutting edge. Didn't .NET 5 just ship last week, Phil?
Oh, yeah. Ages ago. I've been a long time user. Been using it for days, you know. So what we're going to walk through today is essentially 5 examples. The first examples we're going to start with is the Hello World exercise. Then we're going to look at a project with that we can add measures to a PBIX file automatically, show you how you can query a model. A nice, neat thing that Ted and I put together even this week to auto format your DAX, and we're going to show you how to build your own helper function in Power BI. Now, like as Ted said, all this code is going to be in the exercises that you can download and have a look at. But I also have a blog called DAX.tips, where I explain in a lot of detail, including providing all the things that you can download to reproduce this and create these things yourself to get you started. So let's jump onto the Hello World exercise. So the first thing we need to do is install the SDK, which we've done. Then we need to install Visual Studio Code. Let's assume they're already done. We need to create a C# console project because I'm going to do everything in C# today. We're going to add the Tabular Object Model client libraries, and then we're going to perform some bonus steps. So first thing I need to do is fire up Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to create a blank folder that I'm going to use as my project. So if we go new open folder, and I'm going to create a brand new folder called E1 for exercise 1. I'm very creative with my naming conventions, and I'm going to select that folder. This is blank, this is empty, this has got nothing in it. So first of all, what we need to do is create a C# console project inside Visual Studio Code. And one way you can do that is just go to the terminal window inside Visual Studio Code and type in .NET new console, because this is going to be a console application. And you'll notice over here, it automatically creates a series of helper files for the project, with the important one being program.cs for C#. And here's my Hello World. And if I just wait a little bit, what's going to happen is it's probably going to pop up in the corner here and say, do you need help setting up the helper files? It's taking too long. Here we go. I'm just going to click yes in the dialog that pops up down here in the corner. Wonderful. Now, at the moment, we're not connecting to any analysis services object with Tom yet. We're just going to make sure that we can see Hello World inside C#, inside Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to F5 to run this, and on the debug console, I should see a Hello World pop up down here once it compiles and completes. There we go. So that's just confirming that the project's up and running, and it's running the C#. That's fine. So for Tom, we need to install client libraries. So the first client library we're going to run is a analysis services not that one there. We want this one here, Microsoft.analysis services net core for Visual Studio Code. And these links will be in the supplementary material links, etc. So I'm just going to copy this code, which is the .NET add package that we need. Go back to my terminal window, and run that code. So this just installs those client libraries into this E1 project that I've created. I should be able to see that now in Microsoft.Analysis Services.Tabular for the Tabular Object Model. And now I want to paste in some code into the into my main. Let's have a look at this. I'm not doing anything complicated. The point of this exercise is just simply to connect to my server, and I need to go and find out my port number. Then once I've connected, I'm going to iterate through that hierarchy that I showed to you earlier. So we have a server, we have a database, we have a model, and then inside my model, for every table in my model, I just want to spit out what that table name are. So what this little mini script is going to do is display to my screen the name of every table in my object model. But the first thing I need to do is manually go and figure out what my port number is. There's a bunch of ways we can do that. I am going to cheat, and I have a copy of a PBIX file here open, and I'm going to go to my helper tools, which I'm going to show you later, and I'm going to show my port number, and my port number I know is 54059. Cool, so we can get rid of that. 54059. It's not normally this manual. This is for the exercise of this, showing you the demonstration. So let's F5 to kick this off in debug mode. My nice little 21-line script. And what we should see is in the debug, rather than hello world, the names of the tables. So we have a customer, date, sales, territory, product. These are the names of the tables in my in the model that we connected to. And if we want to just check that over here, you can see customer, date, product, etc. So that's working fine. So we have managed to successfully connect to a local instance of Power BI Desktop, and we're working with it. We're just traversing the object model and doing some fairly basic things. But we don't typically want to just spit out the table names. We normally want to do something slightly more interesting, like actually modify the model from out here in our script world. So let's drop in some different code. So what I'm going to do is paste in some slightly different code. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but in essence, okay, let's go through it line by line. We connect. We have a model object which connects. Now in the model, we're going to hard code and we'll say let's connect to a table that's in the model that we know is in my PBIX file called sales. So very, very hard coded this exercise. Then what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if that sales has a measure called VS Code measure. And if it doesn't have one, it's going to create a new measure called VS Code measure, and the expression is going to be hello world. So let's go to my AdventureWorks table and let's expand my sales table. There are no measures on this table at all. So when I run this code for the first time, what it should do is actually create the measure with that text in there. So let's hit F5. Fingers crossed. Pray to the demo gods. And if I jump back to AdventureWorks, without changing anything or touching anything, what we should hopefully see in the field list over here is a measure appear. And it hasn't. I wonder why. I connected okay. We have a sales table. Maybe I need to refresh something. Yes. Okay, so normally what I would expect to see is the measure turn up. So I'm going to run this again. Let's stop on here and make sure that we're hitting the breakpoint okay. And that's not finding it. That's not ideal. We're going to put a breakpoint up here once more. We won't spend too much more time on this. We're definitely connecting to the right. F11, let's just step through. Have we got a table called
occasionally,
save?
if I didn't refresh the Power BI report, I wouldn't see them. But like for the first week I tried it,
Yeah.
Power BI desktop was always refreshing. Then the last couple of days. So, you know,
Yeah.
if you don't see something there, if you refresh, do you see it?
Yeah, I think that might be the case. I think what's happened is it has created it, because what's happening here is it's running a second time, and it's found that the measure is already there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to open this in DAX Studio. When I get my console back, something's a bit locked here. Cool. No, I've clicked the wrong button there. DAX Studio. Okay, what I might do is just check that I am opening this in the latest version, November. Okay, that seems okay. Okay, so I'm opening this up in DAX Studio, which I'll bring over here. And on the sales table, we have a VS Code measure. Okay, so evaluate VS Code measure. There we go, run, and hello world again. So it has in fact added the measure. It just hasn't quite caught up in the field list dialog. So, but here the point of the exercise here is that in a very simplistic way, what we've done is connected to a Power BI model, and we've added a measure when we first run this. But what we've also done is we've updated the measure, and that's complete. So that's kind of cool. That shows how you can use not a lot of code to actually connect to these databases and start manipulating them using the object model. So the next one, am I on the right PowerPoint slide? What we want to do is let's extend this. So let's have a look at another project that, rather than hard code a measure, just a single measure, let's create some automatic measures. So what this particular project is going to do is it's going to iterate through every single table and column in the model that we connect to. It's going to identify any columns that are numeric, and then automatically for every single numeric column that it finds, it's going to create a sum of explicit measure for each column, and then update the AS annotations to keep track. So if we have a look over at exercise 2, and I just need to grab that port number again and go back to exercise 2. So this should be very similar. What we're going to do is connect to a port, an analysis services instance. This is my PBIX file. We're going to create a model object, but here we're going to iterate for every single table in the model. And then for each table, we're going to iterate through every single column in the current table. And then for each column, we're just going to check the data type, make sure it's not a hidden column, and that it has to be an integer, decimal, or double. And if it detects that one of the column happens to match this, then it's going to create a measure. The measure is going to be called sum of the column name and table name, the expression, and here's where the DAX goes in. We're going to call it, you know, a simple sum over column. And we're also going to put it into a display folder called auto measures. We create the new measure, you know, assign the properties of measure name, expression, and display folder. We update the annotation. Now this is quite important. This is kind of an invisible property that you can use to store very helpful snippets of information, so that you can tell the difference between perhaps measures that have been automatically created and ones that haven't. So if you want to go through and like remove them all in a quick bulk operation, you can pull out the ones that you created by detecting a value in an annotation, but leave any measures behind. You know, so if someone sends you a PBIX file that has a bunch of measures and you run this over it and you want to undo it, you can remove these measures without touching the original measures. And it basically creates the measure and adds it. So this may or may not work. but we have a bunch of numeric columns in my sales table. So let's run this. And it doesn't really output anything to the screen. It should just run and create the measures. So we might get an exit code at the end to say, hey, no errors. I'm done. Here's my exit code with 0, so that's cool. So if I go over and have a look at the adventure works, again, normally what I was hoping to see is a bunch of measures actually turn up here. If we have a look at DAX Studio, which is connected to this Power BI instance, I think DAX Studio will probably have updated. So here we see in the sales table, a folder has appeared called Auto Measures. And within the Auto Measure table, I have automatically created with a script sum of order quantity, because we have an order quantity column down here, sum of unit price, sum of extended price. So if we want to evaluate that measure, we can just drag it across into DAX Studio and run this. And I think for the exercise of this, and there we go. So it's giving me a sum output. We don't want to refresh data. So I kind of want to refresh the screen, but never mind. So that just shows how you can extend on our Hello World exercise to create some scripts to do some iteration to automatically generate.
Phil, you try clicking that little call out to the right of the fields list. Yeah, I know that's done it for other. Back in Power BI Desktop, you just go to the very right and see under fields, go up, 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 up to see where the big word fields is all the way to the right. There's an arrow.
Oh, here.
Yeah, just minimize
and redo that and just see if that does anything.
No.
Okay, sorry, I wasted your time.
No, good suggestion. But imagine you had a large table, a large model with a lot of tables and a lot of fields. Something like this would very quickly snap through and create those measures. But equally, you can write the delete code again, as I said, or adjustment code, and you can extend this logic. So now we're going to get a little more complicated. Let's have a look at how you might be able to use a similar sort of scripting environment to actually execute queries against the model. So imagine the equivalent of building a little bit of DAX Studio into your scripting language to execute queries and output some results somewhere. So let's have a look at what that might look like. So this is going to use, we have two client libraries in Tom. We're going to use the other client library, the AMOMD. So the AMOMD is the client library used when you want to fire DAX queries against the model and get results and iterate through them. The one we've been using up till now is just the AMO, which allows you to connect to the server structure, and you can make changes to the object model itself. We're going to execute a simple DAX expression against the model and display the results on the screen. And then we'll extend that with some bonus code to kind of combine this with the last exercise, where what we'll do is we'll create some automatic measures based on the results of the query that we run, which is kind of cool. So let's have a look to see what that code looks like. Okay, so we want to connect to our model, and I just have to remember what my port number is, 54049, and I can show you a way to automatically extract that a little later. Paste that in. So we're going to connect to the model, and here's my DAX query. We just want to run a simple summarize columns that effectively says, select sum of sales agents, select sum of order quantity, group by country region, and filter by red and blue colors. And what this is going to do is open the connection to our model, and we're going to execute the query. So this line here is going to execute this DAX query that we have hard coded into our model at the moment. And then once we get the results, all I'm going to do is display them to the screen. That's all it's going to do. So let's just, and assuming we've got measures called sum of sales amount and sum of order quantity, which we just created in DAX Studio. These are the auto measures that we just created. sum of order quantity, sum of sales amount. Yay, it's lucky they're done. And now let's run this. And it's just going to display it to the screen, which is not necessarily super useful in itself, but it's not a big jump to get this text to be outputted, say, to a CSV file. So as you know, when you're building, when you create visuals in Power BI Desktop and you go export data, I think you might have a limit of about 150,000 rows. What say you want to extract 2 million rows? Now you could get that DAX query through the performance analyzer, copy query, paste it into a local file or just paste it into your code here, and then run this against your model and modify this section here. So rather than write the results to the screen, just turn it into a CSV file and spit it out to a local file, and then you've got no limit. If your query returns 2 million rows, then your CSV file will have 2 million rows or more. And so I get the idea that if you have a common thing that you want to execute regularly against a model, then this might be an option or an idea for you in terms of automation to go in and extract daily sales and spit it out to a file and then fire it off somewhere interesting. Now, to extend on this code, rather than run a query against the model and just spit it out to the screen, the results to the screen or to a file, let's run a query against the model and use the results to then modify that model. So I'm going to jump to a slightly different version of this, which is extended. I'm going to go get that port number again. 54059. I should have this committed to memory now. What this is going to do is connect to the model. We're going to connect to our sales table, and we're going to read in a local file called querycolors.dax. Now, querycolors.dax, rather than hard code it into the model, what I could do is here. And let's just connect to the same model that we're connecting to. This is the contents of that file. Now I could go and paste in 20, 30, 50 lines of DAX code here, go file, save as, and that's the DAX that will be executed and stored in our query object here. We're going to open the connection. We're going to execute the query. Now, with the results, what we'll do is for every single, we're going to clear out any previously created auto measures. So perhaps using the, you could use the annotation. So this is rerunnable. So every time I run this, it's going to clear the measures out and recreate them each time. We're going to read through every single line of the result set from our query. And then what we're going to do is create a sum of my color and sales amount, etc. So let's run this and have a look to see what we get. Again, we're not going to see anything in the output here. All we're going to see is in DAX Studio, in my sales table, somewhere, refresh metadata, display folder, auto measures. Cool. So what's actually happened is I've automatically created a measure here called sum of black sales amount, sum of red sales amount, sum of silver sales amount. So if I get a new entry in my product table with a brand new color, magenta, it turns up in 3 weeks' time. What happens when this code runs now, and you might have it automatically set to run every day, we will automatically create a measure in my model called sum of magenta. So it can react to data. Equally, if the data from the row silver drops out of the product table, that will actually disappear and go away. Let's have a look to see the definition of this measure. Here we go. So this is what was created. The measure name is sum of silver sales amount, and the content was calculate sum la 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 la. And this is the dynamic piece of information that was dropped in through iterating through the result set. So that's kind of interesting. Some people do like to have measures like this that are very specific, auto set up and filtered for their model. So exercise 4. Now, this is a relatively new use case that I was discussing with Ted earlier this week, because once you get the idea that you can pretty much use this to script all sorts of fun and interesting things against your model, one use case that I thought might be quite helpful is to set up a external tool in Power BI Desktop. And the external tool, when you click on it, will iterate through your model, much the same way we've been doing so far in the session. And it will look at every single DAX expression. Now, DAX expression could be a measure, or it could be a calculated column, or it could be a calculated table. Then what it could do is check to see if it's formatted. Now, most people write pretty ugly DAX, one great big huge long lines without any carriage return spaces, and it looks really, really ugly. But what we can do is check this. Sorry?
Are you singling me out here?
No, I'm actually talking about myself more than anything. I can be very, very lazy. And there is a wonderful tool out there called daxformatter.com, which is also embedded into DAX Studio, which means you can paste this ugly code and press a button and bang, it's all nicely formatted, spaced out, carriage return, tabs, the whole lot. Very, very readable, and I highly recommend it. But what we can do with this is we can check to see if our DAX is formatted automatically, and if it's and then what we can do is store in the annotation that I mentioned before a flag or a signal to let us know if this particular DAX expression has been formatted. Now, initially when you do this, this is going to be blank. It's not going to find one. So then what we can do is we can take that DAX expression and fire it off to the unformatted DAX, to daxformatter.com, their API endpoint. And then when we get that back, we can create a hash over that value and store that in the annotation. And that way, when we rerun it, we can check to see, when we hit that DAX expression, figure out what the hash is, check the annotation, and if they're the same, do nothing. Don't refire it back to the API because there's no need. You're just going to waste. There's no point bogging down their API. But if it has changed, if the hash is different, that implies what's taken place is the end user maybe has made a modification to our measure, and we will have a bit of a play with that. And then you can update them.
It's kind of like an incremental refresh.
Yeah. And I'll show you how that works. And we can configure this as an external tool. So one of the neat things you can do now with Power BI Desktop is add an icon into the external tool ribbon, so that you can open a PBIX file, click on this button, and bang, it works. And I'll show you it actually working. Well, hopefully I'll show you it working. I've got a sort of a bit of a dummy PBIX file with some crap that I work on. And in external tools, I have a button called daxformatter.com. And if I look at my measures, I might have some ugly measures in here, like there's one that's pretty ugly. This one here is unformatted, right? It's all just one big, huge, long line. So if I hit external tools and I click on the DAX formatter button, this is firing up a something that's been built in visualstudio.com. This is a new PBIX file. I haven't hit this button inside this PBIX file. So it's finding a whole bunch of DAX expressions that it is sending out to the API. And what's coming back is being formatted. So have we hit rows processes? Yeah. Nice. So that's formatted. Press any key to continue. And look, rows process has been nicely formatted. That was one big long line. Now let's break this. Let's let's break our hash code effectively, and go okay. And I'm going to leave this up, working on it. Let's click my DAX formatter external tool again, and that's going to come up in a window. All of the items that it had previously just formatted, you can see it's skipping. It's saying that the DAX is already formatted. But there's one line in here called measure rows processed, which is the one I butchered. And you'll notice that it's automatic. It has correctly fixed this. That's pretty cool. So this now means I can, Ted can send me one of his PBIX files. I can open it in my Power BI desktop and straight away just hit the DAX formatter button, and it can clean up all his ugly DAX, and it makes it much easier for me to visually digest and figure out what might be going on. So let's have a quick look at
a lot of the tension between us.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's have a quick look at, and I'm going to be doing a blog on this. So probably next Monday on New Zealand time on my Dex.tips blog, I'm going to put in Ted's code and I'm going to describe, walk through the steps of what you need to do to build this for yourself from woe to go. This is right to including, right to the point of including the what you need to do to get the icon in the in your ribbon, which is pretty cool. Let's have a quick look at the code. So what we have here is we have two CS files in our project. We have a simple program.cs, which is our entry point. So we have our main function, which sets up some colors. I quite like retro helper tools. So I always set my font to be white and my background to be dark blue. And then I call the core code, the DEX formatter logic. And if we jump into here, all we're effectively doing is connecting to the model, iterating every single table, and then when we're checking every single measure in every single table and just checking to see whether it requires formatting. So this is that whole go and create a hash of the DAX expression. And if there's no annotation, format it and get the hash and save it into the annotation. If there is an annotation, just do a check and see if they're different or not. So there aren't a lot of lines to this code. I'm sure if you get this, you can make it better or tweak it to suit. There's a little bit of logic about sending it off to the API and getting the payload back. But yeah, we'll make sure that the source code is available so that you can have a DEX formatter button inside PBI desktop. You saw that here first, so I'm pretty excited about that. And it's fairly easy to configure as an external tool. Speaking of external tools, you can go crazy, and I probably have a little bit here. So the final exercise I want to share with you today is what you need to do to create a complete helper tool for Power BI. So this could be an interactive tool used as an external tool. So stick it on the ribbon inside PBI desktop. You can run queries. You can perform bulk operations that aren't easy to do in other tools. So what does this look like? Let's go back to my AdventureWorks example. So on external tools, I've already set this up. I've created an icon of a cow head. This is my cow called Brianna. And when I click on the PBI tools button, what's going to happen is it's going to bring up my console app that I created in Visual Studio Code. And this is a very retro look and feel, my blue background and white font, and I can interact with this. So it's giving me a list of options that I can select. So I can do things like press number 4 to give me a list of the tables in the model. And do I want to display this to screen? Yes, I do. So here we go. We've got a table called customer, date, product, etc. So it's displaying my tables. Okay, that's nice and simple. This is kind of going back to what we had in our very, very first example. But let's say I want to understand what the properties are for that table. And this is the kind of thing I do in my BI work. So let's rerun my list tables, but we can show them as Timsol. So bang, we've got the, now I can drop this into some Timsol processing code, delete some of these out or process them and using Timsol. What are some other things?
You might have to expand that acronym.
Timsol, Tabular Modeling Scripting Language. So that's
what you AS guys use to push out changes to a tabular database that we can start using in Power BI now, I guess.
Absolutely, yes, you can do that. What can we do? List the table storage modes. My tables are all import. That's good to know. It's interesting for me sometimes to know which tables are in direct query mode and which ones are dual and which ones are import. Let's have a look at the table partition queries. This is pretty ugly and not usable because it splits it to the screen. Show the port number. I'm showing via my external tool what the port number is. Typically, traditionally you might have to go to DAX Studio or use command line based connections to get this port number. Here I can just click on my button, hit number 3, and I can see the port number for this. I can run a DAX query 5. So it saves previous DAX queries that I've run. So let's create a new one. So evaluate top in, let's grab the top 30 rows from the date table. When I run this, it displays it to the screen, but also opens it in Excel. So the results let's say I had millions and millions and millions of rows, automatically sent to Excel here. So this is my UI effectively, and I can file save this, do some really interesting things in Excel. And the great thing is with my helper tool, when I want to run DAX again, it's remembered the previous DAX expressions that I've run, for example. And I can also issue a delete command and go through and open the text file where that's saved and delete that out if I no longer want to have that there. I can set my database server. I can look at the table as Timsel. This is probably what I was meaning earlier. So if I want to have a look at the Timsel version for the date table, here we go. You know, I can actually get this create or replace and all the properties, all the sort of interesting things that might be useful to you, the columns, the formats, and so when someone perhaps contacts me and says, hey, look, I need some help with my data model or my queries aren't running that quickly, I can effectively use my helper tool to connect to that, and I can use these tasks to quickly let me know what's important and perform some bulk operations. Or quickly figure out what might be going over and wrong in the model. So what does it look like over in the code? Let's exit this and go back to Power BI Desktop. So is this the right one? E1, 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 E4, E5. Cool. It's quite a long one, and this is the version of the code that I've shared on my DAX.tips blog. The one I actually use myself is much longer, and that's simply because what I do is I just present when you arrive at the screen. I write out to the screen a list of options. So I added one about an hour ago to say show the port number, and this is what gets displayed to the screen. And then a little bit further down, there's a switch statement that says if the user enters the value 3, run this function. If they enter a value 2, run that function. Let's jump to this function and have a look to see what it does. Nothing complicated. When you do that, it just simply writes to the console the connection string for the server. That's it. Whereas if you look at if you want to know the server model, the storage modes, it just, for each table in the model, write to the console, a nicely formatted output of the table name and the table partition mode. So it's not complex DAX. So each of these little mini functions are self-contained, and depending on what it is I need to do, you can just drop that in. So it's very, very extendable. You can create an option 15 and an option 17 to do, delete a whole bunch of tables that, contain the text, ABC, in the name, or create a whole bunch of tables with ABC in the name, and do it automatically on the fly. So there is my taster. There's my introduction to how you can, first of all, work with the Tabular Object Model, and how you can use Visual Studio Code to work with the Tabular Object Model to do lots of interesting things. So, in summary, this is great for automating tasks. You don't necessarily have to run this manually inside Visual Studio Code. As shown, you can build your logic into a console app that you can drop into the external tools feature of Power BI Desktop. But equally, you can take this logic and drop it into PowerShell tasks or Azure functions or things that you want to schedule to run on a daily process to just perform tasks. Go and look through the model and look for some issues. Detect some best practice type things that you want to check for, and let notify you via an automate flow or an email message or an alarm in a certain different way. It's super flexible. You've got total control over the object model. You can just basically get it to do what you want, how you want it to do it. I mean, I'd always recommend, for most tasks, 80-90% of the time, you should be using Tabular Editor and DAX Studio first. I'm not advocating or recommending that you do this to replace those tools. This is complementary and would augment that. And quite often, what you're trying to do here are the bulk operations that aren't quite easy, aren't yet easy to do in Tabular Editor, which is getting harder and harder because these tools do such wonderful and fantastic things. So absolutely, first thing you should do is always download and install Tabular Editor and DAX Studio, then Visual Studio Code. Scripting's fun.
That's awesome stuff. You left some time for me, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've saved you 10 minutes for questions, but also I know you've been working on some interesting things, Ted, about taking a blank server like a Power BI Premium workspace and using the object model to create a database, create some
Creating
tables.
it from scratch, creating it out of thin air.
Yeah.
No
So do you want
Power
to take
BI
over
desktop.
from this point? Do you want to share your screen now and show that?
Yeah, let's go
or?
ahead. I'll go ahead and kind of show a quick demo here.
Awesome.
Let me know. Okay. Let's see. I think you have to allow me to steal the screen from you.
No, okay, I'm going to stop sharing then.
Okay.
We're using Teams Live for this, which is slightly different to Teams. So hopefully Ted can take over. I can see your screen, team.
You see what I'm saying? Well, here are in Power BI service. Okay, now step one is that you have to make sure that your workspace is running in Power BI Premium. So here is a environment that we use that lots of people are using it. Hopefully no one screws it up. Here's the Power BI Premium Gen 2 announcement. But what I want to call out down here is down under workloads. You can basically see that we have an XMLA endpoint, that can be set to off, read only, or read write. So here we got it set to read write.
Yeah, and actually I think with that Gen 2, you need to make sure you're absolutely on the latest client libraries for a bunch of things like SSMS and other client libraries.
I don't think this is using Gen 2. I think there was just the trial to start Gen 2.
Ah, cool. Yeah, but just
so,
highlight that
and then
point.
The other thing is, if I go under settings and I go under premium, basically you get a URL that you're going to need to connect to that workspace, and then we're going to use Tom.
So that's the connection string, right?
This will be part of the connection string.
Yeah.
Now here is this demo. So if you look at the same tutorial, repo under demos, under learning Tom, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to this first piece of code inside the dataset manager, and I wanted to kind of show you this here, so I didn't have to give away my passwords, But if I want to connect as a service principal or as a user, basically we're going to create a connect string. So for instance, if I wanted to connect as a user, data source equals, and it's just that string that we have, from Power BI, and then user ID and password. Now you can also connect as service principal. So if you have connected as service principal with the Power BI REST API, you follow the exact same steps. There's a tenant level setting to allow service principals to call, into the APIs. That has to be turned on, but then you simply give it your tenant ID, your app ID, and your app secret, and you'd be able to connect. Now let's go back over here, and here I have those two things, but mine are filled in, with a valid user and a valid service principal. Let's say I want to display databases, so when I connect to the server, unlike Power BI Desktop, I can have multiple databases I can enumerate through. If I wanted to do something like just get the database information, server databases get name, and here you can see I can get all kinds of information about that. Let's say I wanted to do a refresh. Look how easy this is. Database and request refresh, save changes. Now, the one thing that we have to call out, this is, in preview, the XMLA endpoint should be going GA soon, but still a lot of things are in flux. So one thing that was weird when I did this is it doesn't show up in the refresh history. So basically the XML endpoint can go and refresh the data set, but it's not hooked into refresh history. Therefore, it's not limited to any number of refreshes, but you have to go through the premium endpoint. Now, what I want to show the demo is how do we create something from scratch? So first of all, we're going to create a database in here. Now, if we go back here, I'm going to run this, and we're going to create a new database, aka Power BI dataset. A database is a data set, is a data model. Let's go ahead and run this right here. And as this thing runs, let me step through a little bit more of this code right here. So I have this one method after we create the database that kind of does the composition of the whole data model. So first we're going to add a data source provider and add that to our model. Now I have individual methods here to do things like create the customer table. Just to kind of give you a taste of that, let's come down here, and you can kind of see that when you create a table, you have to create a partition. And the obvious ones to create would be M partitions, because we can basically bake our M queries into that. So in my sample right here, I have something like, the customer's query in M. I'm able to kind of put it into a file with a .m extension and kind of pull it in. But then we define data columns, we define calculated columns, you can define hierarchies. At the end of the day, let's go back here. Let's go ahead and refresh what I've done. And so, what you can see here is that just with code, I've created this. Let's kind of give it the validity test. Can you open it up and create report? And so now you can kind of see that we've created, this 4-table data model. There's my fact table. Calendars is a calculated table. Customer, products, and sales are all pulled out of a SQL database. And we've created the whole thing from scratch. Okay, let's go one step further. And so what I'm going to do at the last part here is let's kind of go ahead and comment this out. And now I have an existing data set, and I just want to basically make a copy of it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run this code right here. And just to kind of show you how simple this code is, as this thing's run, let me get this out of the way so I can kind of show you the method right here. But if I want to simply copy a database, you can see that it's simply, get the database object. And then we're going to create another database. So we kind of create the empty shell. And then we go to the first database and say model copy to. So we're basically copying the model from dataset 1 into dataset 2. We say save changes. And the proof is in the pudding one more time. We come back here and you can see, not only do I be able to create a data set, but if I need to clone the data sets, can I open up in edit report and start using it? So once again, if you wanted to kind of give you a code sample, you could take away and see how it works. Yeah, go ahead. Question.
Yeah, and if I had access to that particular workspace, I could run my helper tool that I just showed you just before, and it could connect, and it could show you the number of databases, and I could connect to the database, and I could start running my helper tools to have a look and try and understand what's going on with your model, and potentially update it and improve it as well. So
yeah, that's absolutely the case. And what I have to see is that we've had this program model in Azure Analysis Services and SQL Analysis Services, and that API is now being kind of shoved into the world for us Power BI developers, and we've never had it before. We've had the Power BI Service API, and so there's something that's kind of annoying to the PM team, and that is the more successful this API is going to be, the more people complain, why are there two? Why can't there just be one? It's because they're, they've evolved from two different products. So I think there's going to be cases where you got to use two different APIs because you need tasks A, B, C, and D. And, some are supported by the XMLA endpoint in the Tabular Object Model, and some are supported by the Power BI Service API. For instance, the Tabular Object Model does not yet support setting server-side credentials. So while you can kind of create the tables, you can't trigger a refresh that will be successful, until either you use the Power BI REST API or manually we kind of go and patch the credentials. So I think the final point is that this is an API that's brand new. It's emerging. There's going to be some gaps, but I think over time it's going to deliver amazing functionality that we don't have. And when it gets to doing productive things to create a data model in Power BI Desktop, or doing live application lifecycle management work, on Power BI datasets running Power BI Premium, it's going to be an important API for all of us going forward. Okay, I hope that's not too profound.
Hey, Ted and Phil, I'm just doing a quick time check here. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Cool. So I think we've pretty much just got time for questions now. Don't you think, Ted? Should we have a crack at some, or did you want to cover anything else?
Just take some questions right here. Well, hopefully we have some good questions.
Yeah, we do. Can you see the chat there, or would you like me to read through some?
Okay, let's see.
Okay, I'll let Ted handle it.
Okay, is there a way to see all the calculated measures and its definitions on a single page, just like we had the calculations tab in MOLAP to write MDX scripts? Do you have any idea, Phil? That's I'm the older guy saying that one's before my time.
So sorry, is there any way to just see all the calculated columns? So yes, you could use the object model. You could
measures And
You could use Tom to iterate through and try and detect these and just spit them out to the console screen or to a file. Equally, there are probably some DMVs that you can run as well, where you can just show me all the measures or objects in the model and what their contents are. So off the top of my head, I don't know what they are, but if you experiment with DMVs, then
here's a good question. Would the custom external tools appear automatically when Power BI Desktop gets updated to the newest version each month?
Yes, it should do. But what you need to do to get your external tool working is drop a little piece of JSON into a folder called external tools. So if you go and do an internet search for Power BI external tools, you'll find the blog that was created, the official blog by Microsoft. Scroll right down to the very bottom, and it tells you there what's required in your JSON file to work. In fact, if I share my screen, I'll just jump to the folder to show you what I mean. It's the JSON file only has about 5 items in it. And here's what it looks like. So I created something called pbitools.json. And if we have a look at that in a text editor with word wrap off, here we go. All you need to do is drop a file called something.pbitools.json. You just give it a version property, a name, a description. Here's the really important thing, is the path to the location of where whatever the executable is that you want to run. The arguments you want to pass to it. Now this is important because this is going to pass that connection string that includes the port number that Power BI Desktop's currently on. It always changes. And then some base64, for the icon. And yeah, if the December version, the January version, Power BI Desktop come out, we won't have to change it. The external tool will still be there in your external tool ribbon, which is this one here. So.
Right. Another one, changing the sort by column is not part of Tom, is it? Yes, indeed it is.
Oh,
so
yes, it is. Yeah,
in the
yes,
demo that I did, you can set the sort, but you can basically create the 2 columns, make one hidden, and then have column A point to column B as the sort by column. Yep.
And that's actually the neat thing about Tom, is when you look at the object model in Tom, like you put a breakpoint on and just explore it in the Visual Studio Code, you'll see a ton of properties in there that you can either get or set that aren't in the Power BI UI, and probably because they're advanced, or we just haven't had time to build them into the Power BI Desktop UI yet. So you can do things like set a default measure in Power BI on your model, which you can't do anywhere else. You can't even do that, I believe, in Tabular Editor. And that can be handy in some edge cases scenarios. So have a look at the object model once you've connected, and you'll see all sorts of interesting things, such as the sort by column property on a measure. So you can see what they are and you can update them using these techniques.
Okay, I think that's we got time for one more question, and it's a good one. What about if you have TFA or two-factor authentication? So, and I think it doesn't apply to what you were covering, Phil, because you're local there with Power BI Desktop. But if you're talking to Power BI, let me go ahead.
Yeah, Azure Analysis Services, Power BI. Yep, just works fine. So the code, the server.connect method, if you're connecting to an endpoint like AAS or Power BI Premium where MFA is turned on, then it'll pop up with a dialog, and you type in your credentials, and you then go to your phone and wait for the thing to pop up, and you put in the code or do whatever the MFA is required, and it will just work.
So you can put your username and password into the connection string, which will work if there's no type of interactive, multi-factor authentication. But if that fails, then it kicks back and just asks you to log in with an interactive login. So it's just built into the Tom API. It's really neat. Great question. Yeah. So I think we need to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you, Phil, for being a part of Power BI Dev Camp. I think we really enjoyed having you here with a great topic.
No, well, thanks for inviting me. It might have been a bit of a whirlwind. Hopefully this has been recorded. So if someone wants to go through and just check something, they can find the recording. Everything I've talked about is on my blog site, dex.tips, and everything we've talked about today are on these wonderful exercises that Ted's put together. So look out for that link. And if you want to get hands-on, feel free to fire questions to Ted or myself. We always like helping people, get more out of these object models. And we really look forward to hearing some interesting use cases that people are actually having a crack at. But give the DAX formatter a go. I think that's quite a fun one. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Phil and Ted. Really appreciate your session today. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. Always learning from both of you constantly. It's fantastic. We did put some links in the chat window to Phil's DAX tips. So I encourage you to go there, and also encourage you to go to community.powerbi.com to have a look at Ted's blog posts on Power BI Dev Camp. And that's all we have for today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you can spend your time with anyone, and we appreciate you spending it with us. Have a great weekend.
See you. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Ted.